Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. If you are listening for the first time, I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of hardcore IT security, IT business leadership, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, and fearless living principles. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited about today's podcast. I interviewed 6 CIOs and spent time with each one of them before the podcast to talk about what is their primary concerns. And they really ranged in 4 different areas. One was related to business intelligence and business analytics. And we talked about that in depth and had some great feedback from the group and some suggestions of vendors for people to look at. We also then covered another major theme was IT security. And of course, that's a topic that's been big these days. And we get into infrastructure impact of moving your data to cloud services like Amazon Web Services, Office 365, and just general training of employees. And then we moved into BCP and disaster recovery and looked at the impact of IT security breaches on building BCP plans and different recommendations of vendors that are doing interesting notification services for DR BCP purposes. And then we wrap it all up with the generation impact of adoption of technology between your Gen Ys, your Gen Zs, your Millennials, and your baby boomers. So I hope you like today's episode, and let's get started. In a moment, we're going to jump into the actual podcast itself, and I want you to know whose voices you're going to be hearing. You're going to be hearing Caterina Lupi, who's with American Psychiatric Organization, Tony Mioni, who's with AHIP, American Health Insurance Plans, Sam McMakin, who's with American Chemistry Council, Simon Cooper with Service Power, Rafael Maldonado with NADA, and Christopher Lumley with MeQ. Now we're going to jump into the show. So let's jump into IT security, and let's talk about that first. So, Rafael, why don't you get started with your questions regarding security?
Yeah, so from my perspective is I wanted to understand what people are doing around security training for employees. We have an academy, and we're doing a lot of research in terms of what's the future of training. And the more we look into it, they're talking about this blended approach to training. So I wanted to hear what has been your approach to training people on security. Because security, unless you're a security professional or unless you're interested in it, it could be a dry subject. So I want to make sure that we're effective on it, that it's not too long, that it is very focused. So I want to see what others are doing because before I invest on whether it is a consultant coming in, we doing some of the training or some e-learning, I wanted to hear what others have done.
Hi, this is Caterina. Did anyone look at the SANS solution for users? Because that's actually what I started looking into.
I actually looked at it, Caterina.
Okay.
SANS. That's what you're referring to, right? SANS training?
That's correct, yes.
Yes, I actually looked at their training. It looks really good. We're having a call with them next week.
So you're looking at more of a video-based approach to training. I guess that's what SANS represents, and it can integrate into your LMS system, your learning management system. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, we would like something that is SCORM compliant. So if we do decide to go with e-learning, then we want to make sure that it's SCORM compliant so we can load it into our internal LMS and potentially eventually even offer it to our members because they have the same challenges that we do in their businesses. So
Rafael, it's Sam McMakin. Question that I have for you is, what would your goal be by this training? So and the reason I ask that is because here at the ACC, one of the things that we do, or I do, is I take every opportunity I have to educate my coworkers here by taking examples of situations, even whether they're in the news or whether somebody has forwarded me a spam email or a phishing email or something like that. And I'll use that, I'll turn that around and use that as an education tool for the rest of the organization. We don't have any specific quote-unquote security training, but security might be a huge subject. Are you talking about I doubt you're talking about physical security. I'm thinking you're talking more about security of intellectual property maybe, or security while using email or visiting websites.
That's right, Sam. So I do the same thing. So every time we have a type of email, like a phishing email, I take a screenshot and I send it out. But to give you an example, we had an issue not too long ago where we got hit by CryptoLocker because someone, unbeknownst to us, or at least unbeknownst to me, had access to their local admin on their machine, and they got in that way because she hit on a link. So I want to educate those users more and make it a formal security, part of our security strategy, that they have to go to this training, like any other training, that like sexual harassment training. So it's part of the training that we provide our users, our employees, so that they understand some of these things. That's basically what I'm doing. What is phishing? How to deal with email, how to protect yourself, how do you use cloud? Is it okay to use this or that or the other? So that basic level of training from a user perspective, because to me, that's the weakest link.
Mm-hmm. This is Chris Lumley. For training, we use a combination of several different efforts. We partner with, for example, a local college who is, one of the top providers for security, maybe cybersecurity classes in the area. So they come in once a year and do a corporate training to our staff. We also utilize a tracking system, where we can create specific or customized training questions surrounding information security, and we pass it out to the staff, and they're given an allotted time to do that, and we track those. At the end of each of those sessions, a test is given, and we expect at least an 80% passing rate on those items. A couple of the things that we do similar to what maybe Tony had mentioned before, when those opportunities come up with spam email or things like that, we do send out monthly emails notifying end users of challenges that may have happened to other organizations, and we use that as an opportunity to just kind of keep it in front of them, keep them aware on that. Even though we do those things, a part of what we also do is to do almost like a defensive approach on networking. So we utilize hardware, software on the network to help to minimize those instances where the opportunity for an end user who may somehow acquire administrative privileges to do things. So, we do monitor those cases and remind those end users how important it is for them to safeguard that they're given. So it's a combination for us. It has been effective so far. Fortunately for us, we have not had any breaches, so to speak. Every now and again we do get those instances of viruses that come into the environment. But with the mechanisms that we've put in place, we've been able to combat those.
I'm going to guide the security conversation just in two areas so we stay on track. So some of the cloud pieces that have come up in the conversation were Office 365 and Amazon Web Services. Can anybody comment to the security impact there and their thoughts or concerns or things that they're doing to mitigate the security impact of moving to Office 365 or Amazon Web Services?
This is Simon. I can certainly talk about it from the Amazon Web Services side. There's quite a lot of things to get into with the authentication and the security aspects of migrating to the AWS cloud. We began our migration last year, so the very first thing that we did as an organization was put everyone through the Amazon certified training courses that are available. They're actually provided by Amazon themselves. They were very good, very well done, and they provided the basics that our internal IT needed to be able to go and establish some of those environments within there. The specific training courses that we put them through on the DevOps side that really focused at how to actually deploy the applications onto the AWS cloud, how to manage the integrated authority management, and how to manage the security roles and privileges on there, and establishing things around also the virtual private connections that we needed into the AWS cloud from our own internal infrastructure and our own existing colo facility. So I definitely recommend that as a first step if you're considering moving to AWS, going through that training and certification process.
Any lessons learned that you would say, Simon, that now that you're on the AWS, kind of things that you wish you had known ahead of time, or things that you're trying to plan for in 2015?
I think one of the things would be take a look at some of the constraints that the AWS platform puts around that, particularly around the VPCs. There are some limits as to how many VPCs you can have within different regions or within a particular region. So you do want to look at that. You also want to look at some of the differences between the actual regions. Obviously, the US East is the region that gets the new functionality, new capabilities first over some of the other worldwide regions. So you do want to pay close attention to that. And obviously also look at your support contract with Amazon and consider whether you want to increase to some of the higher levels where you do get access to, their technical architects, which can help you design the solution in the right way as well. Those have been very beneficial as we started to design out our initial deployments for some of the applications that we host.
Bill, can I jump in here? This is Tony.
Yeah, please do.
Simon, just a couple specific questions. We are looking at AWS right now in a hybrid approach. I'm not sure if you're hybrid with an on-prem solution or a colo solution or all AWS, but I was wondering about specifically if you have high server compute environments. We run a statistical package called SAS. Is that something that is a gotcha when it comes to AWS as far as costs? And the other question is, have you used it, if you're on-prem and AWS, have you used anything for extending a SAN? We're looking at, not buying any more hardware. We still have storage growth. We still have some, we're transitioning to start, obviously, so we will be in a hybrid solution for a while, if not forever. Is there a way, I heard the cloud gateway, I don't know enough about it. Is there a way to extend your SAN architecture so you don't have to buy any more SANs, but also be able to not only grow your storage, but also use your existing applications that work with your storage at like data compliance solutions, things like that, and would they work on the Amazon solution? I know that's specific, but I just want to know what kind of experience you've had.
Sure. So on the first part of your question around compute intensive, one of our products is compute intensive. It uses an AI algorithm to compute field technician routes throughout the day. We haven't seen any challenges with that on AWS. Obviously, AWS supports multiple instance types, so they're EC2 instances, so you can go with very compute intensive. Our application or our product allows us to distribute the load, so we can actually fire up multiple EC2 instances and use the engines across those, and they can communicate using our own internal protocols to share information when needed. So again, depending on the package, you might be able to use some of that horizontal distribution of that load to support that. On the second part of your question, I haven't got any specific experience in extending the SAN. We've typically been running the applications either in our colo or migrating them fully over to AWS. So we've not sort of extending storage between that. It may be worth looking into the AWS marketplace and see if there are any products in there that might support something like that. And usually the marketplace there's tons of options in there for being able to find a variety of different tools and capabilities that someone may have already created.
Okay. If you're running, just one additional thing, I don't want to take too much time, is if you're running, we're going to be running billions of records inside the SAS server, but it's not put out to somewhere else. Is that all included? I'm not talking about performance, but more of cost. Is it sort of whatever you sort of spin that thing up as? Is that sort of included in it? But or is it more like as you compute more and more records, you're going to get charged for it?
The Amazon pricing is very detailed. They're very transparent on it on the website. They have a very detailed cost calculator. So obviously, the way that the typical EC2 instance is funded is you're paying for the compute time by rounded to the nearest hour that you need it. There's various options for whether you want, dedicated instance on dedicated hardware or shared or, even a spot instance where you fire it up on demand if there's availability. You've then got to factor in, obviously, your storage. You've got to factor in also the inbound and outbound data, so actually transferring that data. And there's different options, again, in the storage tier. Whether you want provisioned IOPS at a certain level, that will affect your pricing as well. But they do have these very detailed cost calculators, so recommend trying to put some figures into that. Will give you then an estimate on your monthly costs.
Thank you, Simon.
Great. That's great. Now, on that same piece, I want to nail Office 365. Most of the people in this group are similar sizes. So anybody moved 100% to Office 365 yet?
This is Simon. Yes, we've moved over to Office 365. I think we've had some challenges more with the SharePoint side of it than actually moving over, the general email and Office products with regard to that. I think within the SharePoint, we had an external company help provision that for us, and they created quite a lot of confusing security roles, which we don't have really good documentation on. So the internal team have been working to sort of unpick some of that work that was done and simplify that. So I think that's definitely an area that we've still got a lot of work to do and a lot of experience to come out of that. So again, interested if anyone's had any other experience around that area.
And Simon, you moved your 100% of your email and Office applications, or just email?
Email and Office applications. So anyone in the company can use the online versions of Word, or the offline ones that they can deploy to their local laptop or desktop.
Simon, this is Tony. In regards to the offline where you download it, you have Office actually on the local PC, sort of the way I want to go. Do you control updates to that? Or I heard you can turn it off. I just wonder what the rules applied around that deployment.
Yeah, you can. There are a few rules around being able to control some of the versions. Most of the time, it's a little bit different. We've got a mix of Windows and Mac users, so there's a little bit of inconsistency with that. We've also got some of the folks that haven't chosen to use Outlook. So on Mac, we've got folks that are just using the normal, regular OSX mail application. But that, seems to be integrated just fine. In terms of pushing the updates out, again, we've kind of left that to Office 365. You can log into the online portal. You can go grab a new installation of that. You can run that through. Again, from my side, using a Mac, the experience is a little different. Obviously, the App Store will tell me if there's updates for the Office application. So again, I can go and actually, automatically install those.
So can I do it like in a traditional IT sense where I say, okay, I'm going to download the latest from an IT perspective, pilot it, make sure it's okay, and then distribute it out to the rest of the company?
Yeah, I think you need to restrict that then from the Office portal so that a user can't go there and grab the one specifically listed there. You'll want them to go and grab it from, or have it pushed from your device management application if you use it.
So as far as email and the Office is what I'm looking at, is there a transition? Is there a downtime when you're doing that? What kind of walk us through how that worked as far as user experience?
Right. So we did a lot of testing, again, working with an external Office 365 consultancy company. So they did a lot of testing of moving over the mailboxes. So we have quite a lot of individual mailboxes and then also a lot of shared mailboxes. Originally, at the time of our transition, all our support information was flowing in from our clients, typically through email, into a whole set of shared public folders. So there was a lot of testing that the group did to make sure that the public folders all worked and were all accessible. So that meant taking a copy of the Exchange server, pumping all that data into a test or a sandbox environment, running checks there that everything had transitioned okay. And then in terms of the actual deployment, there was a little bit of downtime. We did it over a weekend to minimize the impact to the organization, but we migrated the whole thing at once. That first week, so first Monday morning when folks came in and switched over, there's definitely a few things that we hadn't quite got right. So there's a few folks that missed the kind of transition. They hadn't pre-installed the new version of Outlook. So there was a little bit that the team had to do, go around and catch these individuals and make sure they were updated and that their email was there. But on the whole, migrating an individual user went very successfully. All the rules came over, all their historical email, all of those settings in Outlook migrated pretty seamlessly over.
Is there an opportunity to not do it all wholesale and not be down for a weekend? Like just do it, on a user, but even though it's more time consuming, but our email is like our lifeblood. We can't have everybody down for a weekend. It just wouldn't work for me.
Yes, I mean, there are options to move mailboxes over rather than moving the whole thing. When I say we did it over a weekend, I mean, the downtime wasn't the whole weekend. It was probably about 4 hours, I would say, from where there was really no email coming through. Again, I think that may vary a little bit depending on the amount of data that you store. Right. But again, that's where you might want to have a consultant company or come in and take a look at what you've currently got in Exchange. They can advise.
Last question, Simon. Really appreciate your answers here. Did you run into any hidden network or infrastructure costs that you didn't see when you did this migration? Was there something, not just the licensing, was there something that popped up that you just didn't realize?
No, there wasn't anything hidden. I think a few things, again, it depends on the tier of your Office 365. I mean, we bought sort of, I think, a mid-tier, so it didn't include all of the Office products. So there was some folks, for example, that were using Visio. So now, we have we already had sort of existing legacy Visio licenses, but now I have to go and move those over later on to the newer version of that to make that compatible, and that wasn't part of our tier. I think there was other things like within our tier, we were paying for Yammer, which we didn't use and we didn't have a need for. So, be careful, I think, with the advices about what tier you go into of the Office 365.
Thank you.
Next, thanks very much I think that covers our infrastructure as it relates to security and covers the training pieces that we wanted to cover from the three folks that had written that down. Let's move into business intelligence, business analytics. I know there's several of you that have experience here, but Katerina and Tony had expressed some questions. Katerina, can you explain your outcome that you're looking for and some of the questions that you have? There are some associations on the phone as well, so they might have some good feedback for you.
So, good morning, everyone. The issue I'm having is that I've been tasked to provide the association 360 degrees view of the individual members and some intelligence about the collective behavior and characteristic of our members and our customers in general, because we also have customers that are not necessarily members. So we have siloed systems. So we have our personified association management software. We have the journals delivery system online and not online. We have conferences information, and there's another one that I'm missing, the 4. Learning management system. No.
Katrina, are they all SQL-based?
Yes, they're all based on SQL. Some are in-house, others are cloud-based software service.
Okay.
So right now there is not a data warehouse. There is no ETL. There is no tool to actually provide a global view of the data. Of course, the data is not clean, so we have a problem of duplication also because the entry points of data are multiple. So different spelling, different emails, different addresses, different references. They're actually addressed to exactly the same person, and we have to resolve that problem. And of course, we can do it, as an Herculean effort now and then. But when we want to have a real-time or almost real-time analysis, that becomes pretty much impossible as we are now. So we're looking at essentially the creation of a data warehouse or some sort of merging of the tools, and then on top of that, building BI and possibly in the future as evolution of our BI predictive analytics.
Is anybody doing anything with BI or business analytics and has started from this type of perspective where you're starting in the weeds and having to dig out and having to manage on-prem and off-prem data sources?
Yes, Bill, this is Chris Lumley again. We do have a business intelligence system in-house, and we've actually had to, combine several items similar to what Catalina is asking about from different vendors. So what we did was, of course, the commonality here is it is a SQL database in the background, and we've pulled information from these different vendors that we have a business relationship with, placed it in that database, and I have a in-house DBA who pretty much just goes in and write queries depending on what data needs to be displayed. To display the data, we have a dashboard that produces items based on key performance indicators that's requested by our leadership. So all of that information is pulled from that data warehouse and displayed in a dashboard. So we've had some experience with it. I can say that it requires a lot of work to start the process up. We've actually started the business intelligence process about 4 years ago, and it did take us some time to get to the level where we are now, where we have combined a lot of those things that Catalina is talking about into one data warehouse environment.
My question,
one of the things that we did probably about 4 or 5 years ago is we recognized that we needed a BI platform as something that we could actually sell as an add-on on top of our products to our clients. So we brought a guy in that had worked in that particular field. He was a bit of a data scientist. And we implemented a product called ClickView from ClickTech. ClickView is very nice. It's an in-memory BI product, so it doesn't have the complexity of OLAP cubes and things like that. It forms nice relationships between these sort of disparate data sources that you might have. There's also integrations to some of the popular cloud products out there. You know, Salesforce.com is an example. It can consume data directly from that as well as from any, ODBC data source or file-based source. We have quite a lot of data that's stored in file-based formats, so it's able to consume that in. The nice thing about ClickView is that once you sort of created the extraction jobs in the background that pull that data into the in-memory BI, the actual creation of the reports and the dashboards can be left to the business users out there. Once they've had a little bit of training on the product, it's actually quite easy to go in and create yourself a dashboard with different charts and gauges and tables and things like that. And it's got everything that you'd expect on the BI. If you want to do automated emailing of reports, you can create filters and views and then share those across the organization so users can share their specific sort of setup with other users in there. So it might be worth a look. Again, I wouldn't say that it's the cheapest solution out there. There's a reasonable cost to it depending on, again, the number of users that you're going to have. But it has been, it's worked well for us, and it's quite efficient in the way that it stores the data. And the nice thing, like I say, is being able to pass off the report creation and dashboard creation to more of the business side of the house, so that you don't have to have a reliance on IT or development to stay on top of that.
Okay. So, hi, thank you. Are you saying that you have not built a data warehouse, so you are accessing, are you having ClickView accessing directly the different databases and then create a connection between them?
Yes, so for ClickView consumes the data into its own in-memory BI database. For some of the applications, it does that on a regular basis. For other applications, we've used it as more of the long-term storage. So as data transitions from sort of operational to archive, we're actually using ClickView then as the data warehouse sort of archive of that data and then purging it from the operational aspect of that. Others, we're leaving the data in the raw application, and then ClickView is just consuming over new data elements or new transactions from that database repository.
Did you have to do any cleansing of data before starting doing this? I mean, do you have some sort of data governance within your systems?
Yes, we actually had a fair amount of data cleansing to do. What we were doing was really looking at how the different data keys would work across those different applications. So, you've got different data keys around particular clients or particular transactions that might relate to, particular users or employees within the systems. So quite a lot of the work went into making sure that we could tie up these different data keys together correctly. Particularly when you're storing things in different databases, we might have data that's maybe stored in an Oracle database, another one that's stored in DB2, and then we might be pulling in some data from, more of a flat file-based approach. Being able to make sure that those data keys matched up correctly was really the bulk of the work we did up front in the design of that data keys that went into the ClickView product in the back end.
All right, thank you.
How long did that take you in terms of, to get to that level?
That was probably at least, I would say, probably about 6 months of work for this data scientist guy that we brought in to actually build out that product. And that was the initial phase. And then we started then, utilizing him for other things. So as well as producing an external product that we were reselling to our clients, we also started to use ClickView for some more internal aspects for ourselves. So an example of that is that it consumes the data from our phone system. We do use that in some of the billing reports that we do for some of the clients. So again, there's data that we brought in, reports are consumed, calculated, aggregated together, and then automatically generated and pushed out to finance so that they can bill it.
So from a support cost, Simon, one of the questions was, what does it cost you to support it with people, what you expect, and did you have to do any augmentation, other than the data scientist you had to hire from the outside, what's your internal cost? Is it in line with what your expectation was?
Yeah, it was pretty much in line. I mean, there's support and maintenance to pay to ClickTech on the software, obviously to keep support and maintenance up on that. I think something that you don't want to underestimate or forget about is the internal impact on the data scientists. In this case, had to go and actually sit with the experts of that data. So, the product managers or the developers to understand the data structure, how the transactions work. So obviously that has an internal cost that you have to bear as well.
And one of the things, Simon, you talked about that actually was good to hear was it sounded like your business user adoption rate was really good. Like, how much education and training did you have to give them? And I would think if you have to give them a lot, they don't want to do it. So I was wondering, how did you achieve such a good adoption rate from your business users?
The adoption rate really came from, some of the sort of default sort of dashboards and reports. And the nice thing about ClickView is that it's very fast. As you start to click on objects and interact with the system, it's very sort of touchy-feely, clicky. As you draw, for example, on a chart to filter that down, maybe a date range, or you click in a table on a particular employee and it filters all the data for them. So you can cut and dice the data very easily. So as business users start to click on things and interact with it, because you can't really hurt it as you start to explore data, they then get the sense that, wow, this makes it very fast and very efficient for me to drill down and find the information and explore the data in new ways. So they then become hungry for more information. Well, how can it do this? How can I see the data this way? You can then very easily say, well, you can create your own. We can tell you and explain to you how to create a new chart or a new object and tie that into the data that you want to see.
That's pretty good, because that becomes more of a pull technology than a push, so you don't have to be in the pushing something onto them. It just sort of pulls them into it.
And how are you delivering ClickView? Are you doing it through the cloud, or is it an on-prem solution? Or can you do either way?
We're doing it as an on-prem. I believe you can get it in a cloud, possibly through Click or partners, but we're delivering it on-prem. Well, when I say on-prem, in our colo or within AWS.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's fully accessible through a browser. There is a ClickView developer, which is like a desktop client, which is where you can do more of the ETL extraction type back-end job creation.
This is Katerina again. I guess I'm the only woman in the group, so I could avoid saying that. But did you evaluate other products? Did you look at Tableau or other product equivalents before picking ClickView?
Again, I wasn't that familiar with that part of the business when this data scientist first came in, but he did have experience of working with SAS. He'd worked with, I think, Tableau and a couple of others as well. So pretty much been doing that his whole career. So he'd seen that, and he was the one that was really pushing for ClickView. Mm-hmm. It was a relatively new product at that time. It was a mature product, but it was still relatively new to the market, and he was just enthralled with the way that it worked. So that was kind of how that choice happened, really, just based on his experience.
Okay, so you trusted the expert on his choice. Okay.
I have also used ClickView in the past. We use it in the association as well today, and it's been very successful. It's a really pretty interface, so that also helps with user adoption. And I used it on retail. I was in the self-storage, and we used it for analyzing our store sales. And we were able to come up fairly quickly, maybe I would say 6 to 8 months it took us to come up. And we had a couple of data sources, not as many as you have today. But I don't think that would be a challenge.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's great. I've never heard of a piece of software. Here's the words I wrote down: touchy, feely, clicky, pretty. for ClickView. That's my summary of ClickView. Touchy-feely, clicky, pretty. All right. So moving on to the next topic. So this is one that's shared from Simon and from Chris, but I think this is a kind of an interesting conversation because I know some of the folks on the phone have pretty well-defined business continuity and disaster recovery planning scenarios. So from Simon's point of view, what are some of the critical aspects regarding planning and testing for BCP and DR? And has there been any success stories regarding this and problems to plan in advance? And I'm going to dovetail Chris's question and Simon's together so we sort of get two perspectives here. I personally think IT security breaches are now going to they might as well be disaster recovery events, in my opinion. And some of Chris's questions are, have people formed this into their business continuity plans? Do they have notification procedures for not just internal staff, but your customers and members? So it's really DR and BCP together in this question. And I think it would be good to see, and for people in the group, some critical aspects to planning that you found successful that you can share with Simon and Chris. So feel free, anybody, to jump in on that.
This is Tony. I think to be successful, it has to, and this is probably pretty obvious to everybody, we had an actual overall steering group from the whole company. We had a consultant coming in and design from scratch the whole business continuity and DR solution. And IT was just a component of it. There was a lot going on with us as far as membership and things. I'm from a healthcare association, so it was a long adventure. And it's a process. It's still going. And now the IT component, like Bill was talking, is we got to start building in, sort of security as business continuity. So there's things in a general sense that constantly move along technology-wise. But to start, it has to be the whole company and senior management buy-in from the beginning. So obvious, but I wanted to say that.
We are actually in the middle of working with our consultant. I was actually meeting with them this morning to review the draft document of the BCP. And we did exactly as Tony described. We met with every single business group or division of the association, and we mapped their processes, people, and technology. And basically, based on that, we built the document. And it was a very good process to go through because you discover things you don't even know are going on. Mm-hmm. So that was very helpful for me. The other thing that we're putting heavy emphasis is in communications. We have customers, our members, also our customers, because we have an academy, so they come in for classes. And some of these folks are, traveling to us and all that. So we have to account for that and how do we communicate with them. So our communication was a very important piece. And how we do that are multiple ways of communicating. So we look at several companies. We haven't decided yet, but I think we're leaning towards using Everbridge to help us with communications. I know that is one of the leading applications out there for that. And so we're in the middle of it. We haven't gone through the whole process yet, but that's where we are. We're also working with another company called Agility Recovery, and they provide backup for power, for allocation for you to meet, and they provide some equipment and communications backups. So it works like an insurance policy. So you pay an amount, and it's very low amount for, let's say, 45 users, for them to provide this for 45 users. When the actual event happens, you have their company helping you through this process of whether it's a trailer that they need to put in or whether they have pre-arranged office space for you, and then they charge you at cost. So it's sort of like an insurance policy. So we're working with them as well.
So let me answer this. When you have that conversation, are you having any type of conversation that surrounds a regional disaster or a local disaster? How does that work for you if it's a regional one?
They actually look at a very big list of potential situations, and they take it to a ranking process in terms of how likely it is to happen and then the impact to the organization. And based on that, they pick, we plan for the top 10 or what have you. So, I mean, you cannot plan for everything. So you just plan for the most likely and the ones that have the most impact. So based on that, they have a formula, and it basically we're taking, I think it's the top 10 or 15, and we plan for that.
And I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring on this topic. We've actually been talking to a couple of the BCP consultants, and I've counseled some people to say, well, they want to do these tabletop exercises on crater in the earth scenarios. And I said, well, really, that's very unlikely. But a data breach we can almost be guaranteed we're going to be hacked. So shouldn't we be developing our DR BCP around that known event, since the best companies in the world are not able to stop this? So the BCP consultants really the ones that we've run into haven't really developed IT security as being a DR event that's likely. And so then how do we plan our BCP plans around that likelihood? So I'm just throwing that in.
That's interesting. That's a very good point. And actually, the consultant that we're using is actually ranked several security-related issues high. So I would say probably 4 out of the top 15 are related to security.
Great. Okay. I'm not going to assume that the pause here is because this topic is exhausted, but one question that's really related to Simon is, from planning and testing point of view, so many of you on the phone don't have regulatory requirements of testing, but we're just doing it out of best practices, IT best practices. Are there folks on the phone that actually have tested a series of events where you cut over to the DR site, either partially or fully? And are there any lessons learned from that exercise that someone would want to share?
This is Tony. We've done a few exercises from email cutover, which we use a third-party service, which is pretty simple. You can test it on one person or the whole group. So being able to test on one person is nice because you don't have to say we're testing everybody. But we've had tested everybody also, or actually had to use it. So the other thing is we've tested, we're talking about DR business continuity events that, here in D.C., you got to be wary of shooters and tornadoes and all kinds of things where we've actually I've got a system in place with our phone and computer and mobile devices where they get alerts. And we've done like shelter-in-place drills, things like that. It's not technical, but it's something that has to be done. We've done internet cut tests. It's hard to do like, hey, today the building's down. You have to, our strategy is you commute from home and you're calling, redirect DNS, and basically all our services are up and running at the colo. But that's hard to do, but we have done that through force, basically, when our building actually got a power event scheduled by PEPCO. We had a couple lessons learned, like the consultant that came in that weekend turned off our AD, caused a few problems with email. But, those are things that you don't really know until it happens. So I know everybody's like, you got to test. And for us, being in the business, heading up IT, it's hard to, but if you can fit it in somewhere. It doesn't have to be a full test. You can just partial test, I think, is maybe the way to go sometimes. That really gets you down the road to having a compliant environment as far as DR and BC.
And this is Chris, and I agree with you, Tony. You don't have to do a full cutover. We've done testing, and we are required by our regulators to complete at least one test annually. And we've actually cut over our entire systems to a colo and gone through that process. The lessons learned from that is the prioritization of items or services that's required. Some business units think they're always first, but based on prioritization or member impact, using member impact as a criteria, we've actually determined that, okay, these services need to be done first in terms of bringing it up in the event of a disaster. So we've gone through that process. The challenge, as I said, is individuals who are expecting to be given a higher priority than is designated by the actual disaster recovery BCP plan that is in place. So, having the conversations and talking to those groups and letting them know the reasons why they are, at the bottom of the list as opposed to the top is a critical part of the process. But we've gone through that process as required by our regulators.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the first step we sort of talked about when we started the discussion is you got to have the plan in place with, senior management overview. Everybody's got to agree to it. It's got to be sort of printed out for everybody so people know when there's an event, their recovery time for a certain service might be a half an hour or it might be 2 days. Depends on what service that's warranted at that moment. So, and it's agreed upon by everybody through whatever committee structure you guys use.
That's great. Thanks for the feedback from Chris and Tony on that DR piece and the business continuity planning. So as we summarize and wrap up here, I wanted to end with Sam's question, which I think is really interesting. And it's his greatest challenge is the diversity of employees across all generations. And what are people doing? What kind of success are people having embracing the different generation types? Actually, Sam and I was driving at the time, but Sam went online and we kind of explain the different generation that there are. That's the baby boomers, Gen X's, millennials, and Gen Zs. So as we wrap up, how are people handling the adoption of technology across this in their organizations?
This is Sam McMegan. That's it. That's the deal, guys.
Hold on, there's crickets. There's a lot of crickets in this room.
I've got one gentleman in my organization that is 70. What is he, 73? He's been managing the same panel for over 30 years. And I've also got folks that are like 21 years old. When I hand them a laptop, they say, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I don't need that. I got my phone. I got an iPad,
Yeah, they never work, really.
Give me a thing.
They never really try to do your word editing with track changes on an iPad. Otherwise, they wouldn't say that.
Well, see, what I've been working on for the past number of years, well, not the past number of years, I should say, yes, the past number of years, is a program that I call MOO, the Mobile User. And the last phase of that program, well, the continuing phase of that program, right now I'm into is implementing virtual desktop. And when you span across and you look at folks and you talk to them about virtual desktop, some of them look at you like, you're talking about, a foreign language, while the younger generation go, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. It's getting to something on the cloud. So that's what I had to rebrand the implementation of virtual desktop to the older generation so that they could understand it's just like going on your phone and pressing the app button and getting to our enterprise applications that we've virtualized and put into our own internal cloud. But when you look at about the diversity of the employment that I have here, or the coworkers that I have here, and the rate at which they consume and adopt technology, it's quite a challenge because you can no longer just say, okay, here it is, here's Microsoft Word, go use it. You have to be able to say, here's Microsoft Word, here's the standards with which we'll use it, and oh, by the way, you can access it not only from your laptop, from your desktop, but you can do it from your phone, you can do it from just about any device, anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection.
Is there a training element to the program, that you're doing?
You're talking about for mobility and you're talking about for virtual desktop? Absolutely, yes, there is. Absolutely.
Yeah, the overall process, are you coordinated with training area in your company that says, okay, we'll build out a training program that will assist with, that adoption to the different generations?
No. To answer that question bluntly, no. When it comes to implementing what we call ACC Anywhere now, which is the virtual desktop, we have a couple of sessions from a team perspective when we're going to roll it out to a particular division. So we have two open sessions related to that. And then we have what we call our white glove treatment, where we go to each individual's office and we actually set it up for them and help them set it up just like they had their old desktop. The only difference is now, instead of signing in by clicking this icon and putting your user ID and password in, once you're in, then you click an icon and then your desktop comes up. So, and again,
you do have some training. You do have personalized training that you're given to these individuals, regardless of the generation that you're dealing with.
I guess what I'm not understanding is I thought this was sort of a generation discussion. This seems to be a training discussion, and maybe it's your experience and how you work with different generations on how you deliver the training. Is that what we're talking about at this point?
No, not well. Training is just one aspect of it. When you look at the different generation gaps, when you roll out technology, there are some of them that don't even want training. They just want to be able to go into the technology and play with it and figure it out for themselves.
The younger ones, yep.
Well, yeah. So what I heard a little bit earlier is when Raphael was talking about mandatory security training, I've got people within our organization that say mandatory training. I mean, I'll click through it so that my signature is the end of it, but I'm not taking training.
If you don't have, some type of guidance or some type of training, how do you know that the application that you're delivering to the end user is being used appropriately?
We do quality checks. So our membership system, we have daily processes that run that tell us what the changes were. Those are reviewed. If there are data integrity errors, we look at those, we address those. And if it does come to an issue where someone is consistently making errors, then we'll pull their access from them until they sit down one-on-one training.
Oh, okay.
I think that going back to Tony's point, talking about how do you deal with this generation, I think the challenge is to understand what makes them tick, right? What is it that inspires them? What is it that makes them go? What is it that engages them? I'm having that situation with my daughter. I have a 7-year-old daughter that she thinks she knows the world. She doesn't want me to do anything for her. You know, whether she knows it or not, she tells me, I don't want you to teach me. I want to learn. So the approach that you have to have with that type of generation, which is the Generation Z, is probably that approach where they just provide them the tools and let them go have at it and have some sort of method to be able to monitor whether they're actually getting it or not, which you seem to have. I think that I'm tired to try to tell people a certain way, and even though I'm saying that with the training, I think when it comes to really managing these people and providing technology to them, I think you just have to figure the generation out and then provide the means to engage them, whether it's technology or anything else.
Raphael, you're absolutely right. That's why I guess I was trying to cheat and see if anybody else had already figured them out. So,
yeah, I think they're very, based on what I see my daughter and some other folks that I have at work, they're very independent. They don't want to be told what to do too much. They want to be given guidance and then have it. They're extremely independent. But I think one of the myths is that they don't work hard. That's a myth, in my opinion. I think that it takes harder to get them engaged and keeping them engaged, but because their attention span is a lot shorter. So,
I think you're right.
But if you provide them with interesting, motivating things to do, they'll work their butt off like anybody else.
I think Raphael was on the right track, actually, with his security training. One is you got whatever training you need. Some things have to be mandatory, and we've talked about, DR and business continuity, and that's sort of one of the things that are tying in right now. But the other is the delivery of it, and you only have a certain amount of resources, and, 5 different training tracks for 5 different generations is going to be kind of tough. But at least at a minimum, the days of mandatory training aren't over, but maybe mandatory training at this date and this time are. And so when you do it on the e-learning platform or something like that, where at least they have a variance of time, they can take it when they want, is at least one step in the right direction.
Yeah, so you're saying flexibility and delivery methodology. I got you.
And they want flexibility too. Just to give an example, for the training that I'm looking at, which is the SANS training, they got very small, short training. So it's not an hour long. It's probably 15 minutes or less. So it's more palatable.
Well, I appreciate all of you. We've covered a wide swath of topics here, 2 major themes and 2 secondary in the hour and 5 minutes we've had. And I'm going to provide the show notes for this, and then I'll send you all individually how to contact each other for follow-up conversations, as you may want to have offline conversations to continue any conversations you may want to have. But I appreciate all of you for participating and helping each other out and providing your perspectives for this past hour. Any other parting comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, this is Rafael. I reached out to all of you on LinkedIn, and if you have any questions, you want to set up an appointment or a meeting, like you guys know, most of us are working on the same things. It's just a matter of scope and a matter of when. So I'll be more than happy to share anything that I'm doing.
On the LinkedIn group, I think many of you are on the LinkedIn group that I've set up. It's just a private group that shares information. It's audited so that I don't have vendors in the group. It's just your peers in the group. So that's an option as well for continuing any discussions beyond this, if you wanted to post questions there. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and we will be in touch shortly.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for putting it together.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Bill.
Well, there you have it, everyone. That was an exciting session for this past hour. I really enjoyed listening into the CIOs on this discussion talk about these issues. And I want to say a quick shout out to our 2 sponsors for today, Red Zone Technologies for comprehensive IT security managed services and IT security assessment services, and also to Thunder DG for IT security policy and education awareness and training. So I want to say thank you, and until the next episode, everybody have a great day. So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone Podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.